Don't boo. Don't waste your vocal cords booing. Vote. That's right. All right, you got the idea. So, Ron Johnson, as your senator, he's now, remember, the question is, who's going to fight for you? Remember that, right? That's who's on your side, who cares about you, who's thinking about you. Ron Johnson, as a senator, helped give millions of dollars in tax deductions to some of the biggest donors who funded his campaign. And after he voted for a tax plan that allows people to write off the cost of private planes, I've been trying to get this thing closed since I was president. If you can afford a private plane, then you don't need a tax break. But no, he fought for this. And then his adult children bought not one, not two, but 3 private planes. Because apparently carpooling was not an option. Now, I mean, you need 3. Meanwhile, Senator Johnson voted to raise the retirement age to 70, supported a plan that would put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block every single year. Each year you'd have to vote to renew this thing. I mean, think about it, because Washington works so well. You want your Social Security and Medicare reliant on Congress every year. He's called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Said that it's candy that the left is giving away. The point is, some of you here are on Social Security. Some of your parents are on Social Security. Some of your grandparents are on Social Security. You know why they have Social Security? Because they worked for it. They worked hard jobs for it. They had chapped hands for it. They had long hours and sore backs and bad knees to get that Social Security. And if Ron Johnson does not understand that, if he understands giving tax breaks for private planes more than he understands making sure that seniors who've worked all their lives are able to retire with dignity and respect, he's not the person who's thinking about you and knows you and sees you, and he should not be your senator from Wisconsin. I mean, the message he's sending is pretty clear. If you're related to him, if you donate to his campaign, you get a deal. If you're not, you're out of luck and you're on your own. So when you see ads implying that Mandela is somehow dangerous and different, ask yourself, who knows more about your life? This millionaire whose top priority seems to be looking out for his rich friends, or a guy from a working class family who understands what Wisconsinites are going through each and every day and wants to make your lives better, whose dad knows what it's like to work hard with his hands, whose mom knows what it's like to work hard as a teacher. Don't fall for it, Wisconsin. You deserve better. You deserve a senator like Mandela Barnes. See through the surface of things. Just go a little deeper. I love you too. You also deserve somebody who's going to stand up for a woman's right to make her own health care decision. Now, abortion has been controversial since I've been around. And I genuinely believe that there are good people of conscience who may differ with me on this issue. But we should all agree that women everywhere should be able to control what happens with their own bodies. And it shouldn't be controversial to say that the most personal of healthcare decisions, the most profound of personal choices should be made by a woman and her doctor and not by a bunch of mostly male politicians sitting in a state capitol or sitting in Washington and don't know nothing about. And that's why when Supreme Court struck down Roe versus Wade, it was a wake-up call for a lot of young people, especially young women who maybe took Roe for granted. It was a reminder that a politicized court can reinterpret well-settled constitutional rights. We can go backwards, not just forward. If Republicans take back the House and Senate, we could be one presidential election away from a nationwide ban on access to abortion. And that might just be the beginning. You know, I taught constitutional law for a decade. If a court does not believe in a zone of privacy that allows each of us to make certain decisions without the government interfering, like it's not their business, then other freedoms that we take for granted are at risk. And Justice Clarence Thomas already said as much. He wrote it in the Dobbs opinion. If there's no right to privacy, then same-sex marriage could be at risk. The same idea of a right to privacy was the basis for saying that states couldn't ban interracial marriage. There's no actual right to marriage written down in the Constitution. Just like there's no right to contraception in the Constitution. So almost every Republican in the House of Representatives has already voted against guaranteeing a right to use contraception. Now you think about that. If they take back power, there's no guarantee that that won't be next. Here in Wisconsin, Governor Evers' opponent wants to ban abortion with no exceptions. According to him, and I'm quoting here, it's not unreasonable for the government to force rape victims to give birth. Vote. Supports a criminal abortion ban. Passed more than 70 years before women got the right to vote. That could put doctors in jail for trying to save a patient's life, because part of what a lot of times people don't think about is there are people who want to bring a child to term, something goes wrong, and if you don't have exceptions and doctors are being criminalized, they don't train to deal with those situations. They won't know what to do in some cases, or you won't have a lot of people who can deal with it. The good news is, if you vote for Tony, that's not going to happen. 2 days after the Supreme Court heard arguments in the case that would overturn Roe versus Wade, he vetoed 5 Republican bills that would have eliminated or limited access to abortion. As long as Tony Evers is governor, he'll keep doing whatever it takes to make sure that women have power to make their own health care decisions. And that's how it should be. So all these issues are at stake. Gracias. All these issues are at stake. If that's not worth 15 minutes of your time, I don't know what is. But if you do need another reason to vote, consider the fact that democracy is also on the ballot. You know, I mentioned earlier things have changed in terms of our political discourse. And I have to admit, it wears on me. Sometimes it feels, the idea of going out on the campaign trail feels a little bit harder, and not just because I'm older and a little grayer. Back when I was first running for office, people didn't agree with me on everything. I'd go, and I was driving myself. I didn't even have a driver. And by the way, I'm really dating myself because we use maps. You know, like paper maps. You never knew how to fold them back up. So they're sitting in the passenger seat. And I'd be driving around, and we'd go out into rural areas, farm country, and there weren't a lot of folks named Barack or who looked like me. And a lot of these were predominantly conservative Republican areas. And I'd stop by a VFW hall where I'd talk to, somebody at a fish fry. Might stop by the local paper. And you sit down, maybe it's at a diner over a piece of pie and coffee, and they didn't agree with me on everything. But we could have a nice conversation. And we could talk about the things we had in common, our hopes for our kids, problems we were seeing with farm prices. You could have a conversation about healthcare and an ailing mom. And over the course of the conversation, maybe we got to learn from each other. And you persuade each other a little bit. And then folks didn't all vote for me just because I had that conversation, but you felt as if you could make a connection. And that's why I ended up getting a bunch of Republican votes. And then after I won for the presidency, my opponent, John McCain, first thing he did, graciously conceded, got on stage, wished me luck for the good and the sake of the country. That was the basic foundation of our democracy. That's how it worked. Some sense of mutual respect. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And that's at risk right now. And listen, you may not hear this a lot of times at a Democratic rally. Democrats aren't perfect. I wasn't perfect as president. I'm the first one to admit it. Politicians, just like all of us, can make mistakes, even with the best of intentions. But for the most part, just about unanimously, Democrats still abide by the basic norms and rules of how the democracy is supposed to work. Like in 2016, when my successor won, and I'm in the one, I wasn't feeling good, but I stayed up till 3 a.m. until it was finally decided, and then I had to call him and say congratulations, because that's how democracy is supposed to work, and we ensured a peaceful transition of power. Now, today, with just a few notable exceptions, and I give credit to some courageous Republicans who probably lost their seats because they believed in the rules, but the vast majority of Republican politicians, whether because they actually believe it or because they're scared to say otherwise, they're not even pretending that the rules apply anymore. They are literally just making stuff up. Mandela's opponent has done more than just about anybody in Congress to spread conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. I mean, he has a gold medal in that event. He said the attacks on law enforcement at the Capitol on January 6th were, by and large, quote, peaceful protests. He did say that the rioters, quote, taught us all how you can use flagpoles as weapons. Now, if that's the lesson you take away from a violent insurrection storming the Capitol, I don't know what to tell you, but I do know you probably shouldn't be serving as Wisconsin's representative to the U.S. Senate. Because that's not how our democracy is supposed to work. I mean, if that can't, if that doesn't elicit uniform outrage, what will? What does it take? Tony's opponent said if he's elected governor, he'll dissolve the Bipartisan Elections Commission. He basically just wants, I guess, to be able to decide on his own how elections turned out or not. He even said he's open to signing a bill to overturn the results of the last election. And to say the obvious, if somebody's openly obsessed with changing the last election, he probably should not be in charge of overseeing this one coming up. You've got Republicans in the Wisconsin state legislature trying to give themselves power to do whatever they want. Here in Wisconsin, already the map is so gerrymandered. They only have to win 44% of the vote to get a majority of the assembly. Now think about that. Think about any other thing you do in life where 44% are on one side, 56% on the other, and 44 wins. It don't make sense. That is correct. And if they pick up a few more seats in both chambers, they'll be able to force through extreme, unpopular laws on everything from guns to education to abortion, and there won't be anything Democrats can do about it. Now, right now, the only person standing in their way is Tony Evers. And let me say this. I know Tony's low-key, he's self-deprecating. You know, he's got a little more of a Clark Kent vibe than a Superman vibe. But don't let the glasses and the necktie fool you, because Tony is tough. He's single-handedly keeping Republicans from driving the car off the road. He might be democracy's best hope in Wisconsin. That's one more reason he deserves your vote. So, I get that democracy might, right now, today, democracy might not seem like a top priority. Especially because people have other things to worry about. They're worried about gas bills. They're worried about food bills. Worried about their paychecks. Worried about their kids. I get that. I understand why, when you don't see enough progress on some issues that matter to you or your family, you might just say, I don't have time to think about something so abstract like democracy. But you know what? We've seen throughout history what happens when we lose democracy. We can see it right now around the world in other countries where the government tells you what books you can read and what books you can't read, that question your loyalty if you don't worship the way they want you to worship. Countries that put dissidents and reporters in jail. Countries where it really doesn't matter who you vote for because the game really is fixed and people will do anything to keep the power they've got, and where corruption is rampant because there's absolutely no accountability. I've seen it. I deal with, when I was president, I dealt with countries like that all the time. And once that goes away, once self-government goes away, it's hard to get it back. It's dangerous, and people get hurt, and it can have real-life consequences. And that's why generations of Americans, my grandfather in World War II, folks in every generation, have fought and died for the idea of self-government. That's why folks marched down in Selma, and some folks died to make sure that the rules were fair. That's why women suffragists marched and fought so that they could be included in self-government, so that we could set up rules that were fair to give everybody a voice. Rules that we teach our kids when they're little about being honest and about being fair. Rules about how we should make decisions if we're in a group. Everybody gets a say, everybody takes a turn, everybody raises their hand. If you don't get your way, you don't throw a tantrum in the sandbox. You don't pick up your ball and go home. We teach our kids this stuff. We tell our kids, no, you get over it. You try to do better next time. I mean, I lost my first election for Congress. I got whooped. I didn't say, wow, the election was rigged. I didn't say, let's go storm the Capitol. And that's what I mean when I say democracy is at stake in this election. And that's why it's not enough to elect Democrats like Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers. You've got to elect good people up and down the ballot. Because if things get close, they could make all the difference. And guess what? The good news, because I know some of this has been a little dark, but here's the good news. You get to make a difference. Your vote will make a difference. That's why Republicans are working so hard to stop you. And that's why you can't let them. We joke in my house that between me and Michelle can be the glass half empty person sometimes. And I'm more the glass half full guy. I'm the hope and change guy. So I'm usually a little more optimistic at the dinner table. And sometimes when she gets down about the state of the country or the world, she's been reading a little bit too much news, I tell her, honey, everything's going to be okay. And I believe it will. But I also know things won't be okay on their own. We have to fight for it. We have to work for it. Not just on election day, but every day in between. That's why this election matters, Wisconsin. And I know these are tough times, but we've been through tough times before. The important thing is to resist the temptation just to throw our hands up and turn inward and see politics as a zero-sum game where rules are made to be broken, and the only way for people like us to win is for people like them to lose. To sink into cynicism. Even in our darkest moments, and I remind Michelle and I tell my children, this country's seen darker moments before. Underneath it all, I believe we've had more in common than our politics and our politicians suggest. Even when times are tough, I believe what unites us can be stronger than what divides us. There have always been certain values that bind us together as citizens, no matter who we are or where we come from or what we look like or who we love. We think about our kids and we think about working hard and we think about being honest and being fair. Homespun values. And it doesn't matter whether you're on a farm somewhere or you're in the inner city. People have a sense of that. Doesn't matter what your last name is. That's the promise of America. That's who we at least want to be. And in this election, you have a chance to do that. To make America live up to what we hope it can be. You have a chance to vote for leaders like Gwen Moore. You have a chance to vote for Josh Call. You got a chance to vote for Sarah Rodriguez. You got a chance to vote for a great and decent governor like Tony Evers. You got a chance to vote for an outstanding young man who will work hard for you, Mandela Barnes. You got a chance to vote for this whole ticket that will fight for a big, inclusive, hopeful America that we believe in. An America where we might not fix all our problems overnight, but where we can make things better. And better is worth fighting for. So if you're anxious, if you're frustrated, don't complain. Don't boo. Don't tune out. Don't get bamboozled. Don't fall for that okey doke. Vote. Get off your couch and put down your phones for a minute and vote for this whole Wisconsin Democratic ticket. Tell other folks to do the same, because if enough of us make our voices heard, things will be better. And we will build a country that is more fair and more just and more equal and more free. Let's go do this, Wisconsin. Thank you, Milwaukee. I love you. Let's get to work.
You've been listening to former President Obama speaking live in Milwaukee, stumping for Democrats in a final pitch to get voters out. Less than 10 days now until Election Day. But as Obama made clear, the election is already happening. Early voting happening right now. The former president spending the past 45 minutes or so asking voters to look within themselves before going to the polls, challenging voters to ask themselves, who has really got your back? Watching along with us, Democratic strategist Xochitl Hinojosa and Cecile Richards. She is the co-chair of American Bridge 21st Century and the former president of Planned Parenthood. Thank you both so much for sticking with me. I want to tell you what I saw coming out of those remarks from the former president, and then I want to get responses from both of you. Xochitl, I thought it was sort of remarkable that you had the former president doing something that you and I, as comms people, know well, which is this idea of getting inside the circle of saying, I understand why you may be anxious. I understand why you may want to write this off. Here is why you cannot. Before pivoting to all of the attacks we have heard Republicans launch against Democratic candidates. Yes, they're talking specifically here about Wisconsin, but these are national attacks. Really talking through why we're seeing the inflation numbers that we're seeing, putting that into a global context. Also talking about crime and how crime has actually been an issue for the past 7 years, not just for the past 2 years, in rural areas as much as it is happening in urban areas, before pivoting to some of these big existential threats. What is happening with a woman's right to choose? What is happening to the very state of democracy? And then, Sochi, the thing that makes this peak Barack Obama saying, I know this all sounded very depressing, but I want you to remember what I am hopeful about, and that is the fact that you can do something about this. You can vote. Sochi, you have been watching along with me. What stood out to you about those remarks?
That's absolutely right. He went ahead and tackled the issues that voters care about, whether it is crime, inflation, gas prices. He also talked about women's reproductive rights. These are all issues that are front of mind for many voters. And he did so, and he had a rebuttal to each and every one of them. I think in all of these speeches, whether it be in Wisconsin, he was in Michigan today, also in Georgia yesterday, he used the opportunity to talk about how each of these candidates, Democratic candidates in these states, are well equipped and to tackle these issues. And he went through each of their opponents and talked about why they are not, how they don't have the best interests of American voters, how they're looking out for the ultra wealthy, how they will not tackle the issue of inflation or gas prices or reproductive rights. And many of them are spreading conspiracy theories. And so I think, President Obama is a very effective surrogate. I'd like to see him on the campaign trail more. He was extremely articulate in exactly how Democrats should make their case ahead of the midterms, tackling the issues that Republicans are hitting us on, but also, tackling the issues and saying what's at stake. And you know what? What's very different between him and, let's say, former President Trump is that he has this message to vote. And this is what Obama does best. He talks about the importance of voting and how we all need to get out and get our family members out to vote. So I think that he's effective. I love seeing him on the campaign trail. He excited me, and I'm sure he excited many voters.
Cecile, it also struck me that he talked about Governor Tony Evers and reminded us that while we often think of abortion, access to reproductive care as a federal issue, governors like Evers are the final line of defense, vetoing down some pieces of legislation that may come to their desk.
Absolutely, Alicia. I mean, I think what we all know since the Dobbs decision is that your ability to make your own decisions about pregnancy 100% depend on who your governor is. Now, as I think President Obama and others have said, that's only until, of course, the Republicans, if they should gain control of Congress, of the House of Representatives and the Senate, believe me, they will pass a national abortion ban. But right now, Tony Evers is the only thing that is standing between women and losing all of their rights in the state of Wisconsin. The same can be said in the other states that he's traveling in. Certainly, the state of Michigan with Gretchen Whitmer's critical re-election, Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. All of these states are on the knife's edge. I mean, these are very, very competitive states. And I just have to say, of course, hearing the president tonight just, it kind of brings tears to your eyes, because here is a president, a former president, a leader in this party talking about a hopeful, inclusive America, that what ties us together is so much greater than what divides us. What a refreshing change from what we hear from the Republicans, who seem to be completely focused on dividing this country even further. And that's what we needed to hear tonight. That's what we need to hear in this election, that voting matters, that the country's best days are still ahead of us, and no one can deliver that message like President Barack Obama.
Xochitl Hinojosa, Cecile Richards, thank you both so much for staying with us, for watching this speech, for offering your analysis. All right, I want to turn to the biggest news this Saturday, the violent attack against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, and the rising threat of political violence. The Speaker's office says her husband is expected to make a full recovery after an intruder attacked him with a hammer inside their San Francisco home. When officers arrived early Friday morning,